This happened not too long ago. After a long day of work, I was driving home and starving hungry. I stopped at a McDonald's because it was just about the only place still open. After getting there, I decided to park in the parking lot and go inside to order. The drive-thru line was sort of long, and I thought it might be faster to just order inside. When I got inside the building, nobody else was in there other than employees. One employee stood behind the counter, and I walked up and ordered. After ordering, the employee went into the back and told me that they would be out with my order shortly. I then stood there, getting hungrier and hungrier by the second. As I waited, I glanced around the empty restaurant. That's when I noticed what appeared to be two men. They were not inside the restaurant exactly, but in the space between the first doors you walk in and then the second set of doors. The thing that really caught my attention though was that they were wearing masks. The masks looked like they were possibly from some movie or something, but they were really creepy. The guys just stood there inside. I looked away and continued to wait for my order. Probably about a minute later, the door opened and I saw the two men walking in. They made their way immediately to the left and inside the seating area of the restaurant. Then they went out of sight. The fact that they were not going up to order, but almost going to hide, was kind of concerning to me. Could they be planning to rob the place or something? That's what went through my head at first, but I quickly pushed that thought away. No way, I told myself. I stood there waiting for probably 2 more minutes. Then a McDonald's employee emerged from the back with my bag. I took it, and in that moment, considered letting the employee know about the men in masks who had gone inside. But ultimately, I decided not to. I walked away and left the restaurant. I did wonder though who those guys were and what they were doing. I was second guessing myself the whole way as I walked out to my car in the parking lot. Maybe I should have said something, but as I was reaching my vehicle, I heard a noise behind me. I turned around as I was just a couple of feet away from my car door. When I did, I saw both of the two men running at me in a full sprint. They had just left the building, and there was no question that they were headed straight for me. I quickly unlocked my car, opened the door, and jumped inside of it. I hit the lock button, and the guys reached my car in less than 5 seconds. They tried opening my doors, and then started aggressively banging on my windows. I did the obvious thing, which was to back up and drive away. The men both kept hitting and kicking at my car as I did. Then they ran off to the far side of the McDonald's building. I got out of there as quickly as I could, and then called the police when I was safely on the road. I'm sure the men probably ran off before the police got there, but I hope they were able to find them. Apparently, the men had targeted me. I'm not sure if that was their plan the entire time, if maybe they had been watching me, waiting for me to go in, or maybe they just decided to after seeing me inside. Who knows? What I do know is I'm really glad that I'm okay. This is something that happened back when I was in high school. During that time, I lived at home with my parents and brother. We also had 2 dogs. Usually, just about every day, the dogs would be walked. It would either be me, my brother, or my parents walking them. One night, it was probably like 8 p.m. and the sun was setting. The weather was pretty nice though, and the dogs needed to go for their walk. My parents decided to take them, and my brother was at his friend's house. I was having a hard time with my homework, so I stayed home alone when they left. When my parents walked the dogs, I never really quite knew how long it would be. Our neighborhood was pretty quiet, but it was also pretty large. There were lots of streets and houses in the general area, and there was also a park not that far away. Sometimes it would be like 20 to 30 minutes for the walk, and other times it would be over an hour. I was up in my bedroom when my parents told me they were leaving, and I said bye from up in my bedroom and then heard them walk out. After that, I tried hard to focus on my homework. It was some math assignment, and I just couldn't seem to understand it. I was trying my best to figure it out though, and I lost track of time. The next thing I knew, I heard the front door downstairs opening. I automatically assumed that it was my parents getting back, and I remained focused on what I was doing. But several moments later, I realized that that wasn't right. If my parents were home, I would have heard the dogs with them. The only thing that I had heard when the door opened was somebody walking inside. I never heard my parents' voices or the dogs or anything. I stopped doing my homework. Then I stood up and walked to the doorway. I listened closely to who was inside of our house. I heard nothing but silence. Now I didn't know what was going on. Clearly, it wasn't either of my parents, and I knew that it wasn't my brother either. I thought about going downstairs to look around, but for some reason, I just felt like that was a really bad idea. Instead, I quietly shut my door and went back inside of my room. I couldn't really focus anymore on schoolwork. I was replaying in my head, hearing the door open and close, and wondering if I had imagined the whole thing. Looking back, I was starting to question myself. Then, out of nowhere, I heard the sound of somebody walking up the stairs. The footsteps reached the top, and then started to approach my bedroom. I began to panic, and was really scared that whoever it was would go into my room. I did not have a lock on my door, so they would be able to just walk right in if they wanted. When the footsteps reached my room, they walked right past. Whoever it was going to the end of the hallway. Back there was a bathroom and my parents' bedroom, as well as the guest bedroom. My brother's was right across the hall. I heard whoever it was reach near where my parents' bedroom and the guest bedroom were, and without even giving it much thought, I ran to my doorway, opened it, and sprinted for the stairs. I didn't look at all to see who was actually inside of the house. I felt like this was my best opportunity to get away. When I had raced down the stairs, I ran directly for the front door. I then went outside and started running for the street. I couldn't tell you if whoever was in the house with me went after me or not. My memory of it all is just a blur. When I got back out to the street, I just started jogging until I saw my parents with the dogs. They saw me running and wanted to know what was up. I told them that somebody went inside the house. My dad called the police, and we waited a distance away until they arrived. My parents had left the door unlocked after leaving. Our neighborhood was not known to have crime really, so this was a big deal. The police got there, and only then did we return to our house. When we got back, whoever had been inside the house was now gone. They didn't even steal anything. After that experience, we always locked our doors. In the weeks that followed, there were 2 reports of burglaries just a few blocks away. I think that it was probably the same person. I know a guy was caught in connection with them, but I really don't know if he was the same person who went inside our house or not. I don't really know if there's a way to prove it either. I'm just glad I got out of there when I did. There was no way I was going to stay in the house with the guy just down the hallway from me. That was one of the scariest moments of my life. This happened about a year ago. I went to a Burger King with my friend Emily. It was probably about 8 p.m. and we sat down in a booth to eat. Emily and I were just chatting and joking around, having a good time like always. We had been there for maybe 20 minutes when a man who was a Burger King employee walked over to us. He was sort of average height, had a little bit large build, and had dark hair. Immediately, I was wondering what he wanted. Burger King is not the type of restaurant where you have a waiter. It's not even the kind of restaurant where people usually come over and ask how the food is or anything like that. It's just a fast food place. He said hi, looking at both me and Emily. We said hi to him, and then there was an awkward silence. He started having like a casual conversation with us. I remember he said something like, "How are you guys doing?" or "What are you guys doing?" We were both confused and just told him that we were eating and talking to each other. He kept hanging around though. He was standing right next to the table. That's when Emily asked what the guy wanted. He acted all insulted and was like, "What did I do?" I thought he might be joking, and that's when the guy helped himself to a seat. He scooted in and sat right next to me on the bench of the booth. We sort of laughed it off, but I know I was secretly wanting him to leave, and I thought it was really uncomfortable. I'm sure Emily felt the same way too. Then, he asked us if we could go order him some food. That's when he started getting rude. We asked him to leave, and he just kept sitting there, and we argued with him for a while. It wasn't like a big scene or anything, and we weren't shouting, but we were going back and forth. Finally, he angrily got up and left us at the table. We watched him walk away and out the door. He'd been talking to us for a total of almost 10 minutes. Emily and I were really annoyed by this. We decided to go up and complain to let them know that one of the employees had been harassing us. When we walked up there was a woman behind the counter. I said to her that there was an employee that had been really rude to us. The woman at the register looked annoyed. She said, "Yeah, and he was fired earlier." She went on to say that he had been fired just earlier that night when she had thought that he left. The area we were sitting in was not visible to the front counter. She apologized and gave us a gift card for the trouble. We were also offered free ice cream. We accepted the offer and went back to sit down in the booth. We were there for maybe 10 more minutes, and then we left. After we got outside, we started walking to my car. I had drove from my house, which was really close by. When we were walking to my car, we saw the same employee step out of one of the cars that was parked in the parking lot. He started approaching us. Without giving it a second thought, Emily and I both sprinted for my car. As we did, he started running towards us. We got to my car as quickly as possible and got inside and locked the doors. It was probably the fastest amount of time that we possibly could have done it in. He reached the car just moments later. He tried opening Emily's door on the side. It was locked though. I backed away and left the parking lot. I was afraid that the guy would follow us home, but thankfully he didn't. This was definitely my scariest experience at a Burger King. I'm not sure why the guy was fired from Burger King, but he clearly had some problems. What his intentions were, I don't know, but hopefully Emily and I don't see him again. Last year, I lived in Oregon for the year. I don't live there anymore because I changed companies. I moved into a house about 20 minutes outside of Portland. The area was pretty nice and I enjoyed it, but just my third night living there, somebody tried breaking into my house. I was setting up a TV stand in my bedroom when I heard some noises coming from the other side of the house. I started to walk over, wondering what it was. I made my way out of my bedroom through the hallway and near the dining room. When I was walking over to the dining room, I heard the back door open. I was not expecting that. I backed up a few steps, and I briefly heard footsteps in my house, and then they turned around and left, and I heard the door open and close again. I went over to my side window and looked outside. I saw a man walking away at a pretty fast speed, but as he was walking away, I got a really good look at his face. He was about average height and had dark brown, kind of messy hair. I went over to my back door and locked it. I'm not really sure how the guy got in, but next I called the police. They came out to my house, but the man was long gone by then. I gave a description and all the information that I could, but it really wasn't much to go on. I was hoping that the police would be able to find whoever had done it, but after they left, I didn't feel too confident. I just didn't really feel like I gave them enough information, and the man would probably be long gone by now. I was a little bit concerned that whoever the guy was would be back. A few days later, I was outside doing some yard work. I was pretty close to the street, and I noticed somebody was walking down it in my direction. Beyond that, I didn't pay much attention because I was focused on what I was doing. When the man walking down the street reached me, he did not walk past, but he stopped where I was and said hi. I turned around and saw the guy. It was the same man who had broken into my house. He was smiling now and asked me if I had just moved in here. I tried to act normal and I said yes. He was really friendly and said that he lived just down the street. We talked for maybe a minute, but I wasn't able to keep the conversation going very well for obvious reasons. I'm not sure if he picked up on it or not that I had seen him. I really don't think that he thought I had seen him at all. Why would he go over to me if he did? After we talked, he walked away. I went back to the police after that and told them the information. It turned out that the guy did in fact live on my street, but he denied it, and the police had no solid evidence, so I couldn't really do anything. I did install a security camera at my front and back doors. However, nothing else strange happened. I don't live there anymore, and I'm glad that I don't have to live near that guy. I still wonder why he was trying to break into my house though. Just last week, I tried to call my friend Alex, but got the wrong number. She had literally just gotten a new phone, service plan, and number. She didn't immediately give me the new number though, and I had to get it through our mutual friend Josie. When I dialed, somebody picked up, but it certainly wasn't Alex. It was a man's voice. I asked who it was, and the person said that I had the wrong number and then hung up on me. I redialed Alex's number more carefully this time so that I wouldn't get it wrong again. This time, Alex didn't pick up either. Nobody did, and I left her a message letting her know that it was me who called her and for her to add me to her new phone. About an hour later, she texted me back. We texted back and forth for a little while, and Alex asked me if she could come over to my place the next night. I said sure, and it would work out fine because I didn't have anything going on the next night. When the next night arrived, Alex texted me saying that she was coming over. Then I didn't hear from her for a while. I was just sitting on my couch watching TV as I waited for her to get there. At last, she texted me. She told me that she was at my front door and to let her in. My door was actually unlocked, and I told her this. A few seconds after sending the text, the door opened. I looked over from the couch and saw somebody walking in. But it wasn't Alex. It was a taller, larger man who was wearing a baseball cap and had glasses on. He closed the door behind him and then started walking towards me. I was obviously really surprised. I didn't say anything to this guy though. I just went with my initial reaction to run away. He was maybe 30 feet away from me, and I was close to my bedroom, so I jumped off the couch and ran inside my room. I then shut the door and locked it. Within 5 seconds, he was at the door on the other side. He tried opening it, and when it wouldn't open, he started saying my name. "Maya, open the door." I screamed that I was calling the police. The guy tried opening the door again and then started pressing on it. I began dialing 911. I didn't care if he heard what I was doing, but he seemed desperate to try to stop me. He then walked away from the door, and I was hoping that he was leaving. I began speaking with the 911 operator, letting them know what was going on. But only a few moments later, the man returned, and I started hearing loud bangs on my door. He must have been trying to break the door down. I of course mentioned this on the phone, and I was not going to hang up the call until the police arrived. As the bangs on the door got louder, I moved into the back corner of my bedroom and into the closet. Luckily, my closet had a door on it, and it was big enough for me to go inside. The door didn't lock though, but it still made me feel a lot safer. I could still hear the guy, and he wasn't letting up. I was sure that he was going to break the door down. At last, I stopped hearing the banging, and I heard some commotion in the main part of my apartment. The police must have arrived. I couldn't hear all that well because I was still hidden in my closet. I was surprised by how fast the police got there. It was probably like 3 or 4 minutes total. I finally emerged to see several officers in my room and others in my apartment. They had arrested the guy, and I saw that my bedroom door was heavily damaged. Thankfully, it held up just enough. I later found out that the guy had stolen my friend Alex's phone. I had never dialed the wrong number after all. It was right. I just reached the person that stole her phone. He had been texting me pretending to be Alex as well. Alex was able to get her phone back, and I will have to get my door replaced. My name is Denise, and I used to live in an older apartment close to the city. I lived in it for 1 year total. Over my time living there, I got to know a couple of my neighbors, but not many. I would see some people around the building or in the hallways, but most of them I never had any conversations with or anything. After I had been living there for almost a year, something odd happened. It was really late at night on a Friday. I was staying up late watching a movie, and I was by myself. All of my lights were off, and I was eating popcorn when suddenly I heard that somebody was trying to enter my apartment. The front doorknob was rattling, and it startled me. I paused the movie and listened close. The doorknob turned several times. I kind of expected somebody to knock, but they didn't. Whoever was there tried opening the door again. I got up as quietly as I could and tiptoed over to my front door. It wasn't that far away, and when I looked out the peephole, I saw a guy standing right outside. He appeared to be looking closely to my doorknob or lock area, so I couldn't see his face at first. As I leaned my face against the door moved a little bit. When it did, the guy at my door backed up and I saw his face. It was one of my neighbors. I didn't know his name, and we had said hi to each other a couple of times in the hallways, maybe once or twice. I knew that he lived on my floor and across the hall, about 4 doors down. After he backed up, I saw him walk away back towards his place. I was kind of creeped out. Why was he trying to get into my apartment? I stayed up for a while and looked outside of my door a few more times. I never saw him again though. I was finally able to go to sleep at like 3 a.m. The next morning, I woke up at about 9. When I left my bedroom, I thought I heard something at my front door again. I don't know if I was just paranoid now, but I walked over and looked out of it once again. The same guy was there, my neighbor. He then tried opening the door again. When it didn't open, I saw him just turn around and walk away. I did my best to make sense of this, but I had no idea what he was doing. A couple of days went by. I was leaving to go to work and happened to see my neighbor walking in my direction like we were going to cross paths down the hallway. I wanted to turn around and go back to my place, but I decided not to. When we made it within about 10 feet of each other, we made eye contact. That's when he said hi to me and told me how he had gone to my door the other night. He said that he didn't know if he woke me up or not, but he had accidentally tried to enter my apartment, and he apologized. He told me that he had gotten back home from the bars with friends and was a little drunk. I told him it was all right, and I understood, and then we went our separate ways. But I didn't understand. At first, it all made perfect sense to me, and I felt relieved. But after I thought more about it, I realized that he didn't really seem drunk when he was messing around with my door. and the way that he was messing with it, it was like he was trying to break in, not like he thought that he lived there. And even if he was just drunk, why did he come back and try to get in again the next morning? I don't think that he would still be drunk and wander back to my apartment at 9 a.m. I tried to just tell myself that I was making more of it, and he was telling me the truth. A few more days went by. It was late at night again, and this time I was in my bedroom on my phone. The time was probably about 11 o'clock, and there was a knocking at my door. It was kind of quiet, but I heard it. I got up, walked over to the door, and looked outside. The same guy was back. As I was looking out the peephole, he knocked again. When he knocked, I accidentally bumped the door forward again with my head. Like I said, my place was kind of old, and the door would rattle in the hinges really easily if you touched it. When the door moved slightly, the guy quickly ducked around the corner. Everybody's doorway went in a little, so if you hid around the corner right in front of it, you could not be seen. I'm not sure what he was doing, but I didn't like it at all. I kept watching, and after about 30 seconds or so, he moved back into view and knocked again. I kept still and did not move. He knocked once more and then finally left. I don't know what he wanted, but I just had a bad feeling about it. Less than a month later, I moved out of that apartment, and I'm glad that I did. I live by myself in a one-story house that I own. Last year, it was during the summertime, and I was sleeping with the window open a crack to let more cool air in. My bedroom is at the front side of the house, and there's a giant row of large bushes that are along the side of the house, and they stop just at the side of my window. I was woken up from my sleep when I heard the noise of rustling in the bushes. I'm a pretty light sleeper, but with the window open, the noise was rather loud. When I woke up, I looked to the window, but I kept my blinds down just above the roughly 3-inch crack in the window, so I really couldn't see outside at all. I flicked on the light, which was right at my bedside, and my room then lit up. I got out of bed and went to the window to see, but then I heard more rustling in the bushes. I didn't see anything as I walked over there, and I was quite confident that the noises were caused by an animal, likely a deer. There was a pretty big woods and a park bordering my next-door neighbor's backyard, so we would often get all kinds of wild animals wandering in our yards at night. When I got to the window, I lifted up the blinds and looked outside, but still didn't see anything. Whatever had been there was now gone. After that, I just went back to bed. Probably a couple of nights later, almost the exact same thing happened. I was once again sleeping and woke up in the night to the sound of the bushes moving. I had my window open a few inches again, and my blinds mostly down. Everything was just as it had been all week. I sat up and turned my lights on again. I looked to the window and just barely saw movement of something going away. I couldn't tell what it was at all because of how dark it was, but I had a feeling that maybe it wasn't an animal, but a person. I went over to the window and looked out of it again, but they were gone. This time, I closed the window and locked it and put the blinds down all the way. I was able to go back to bed after that without a problem. I was telling myself it was just an animal, but I just had a creepy feeling that it wasn't. The very next night, I was up late. It was a Friday night and I was watching TV in my bed. I hadn't put my blinds down yet because I wasn't ready to go to sleep. It was probably around 1 o'clock in the morning, and I saw something out of the corner of my eye. I turned and looked to the window. That's when I saw a man standing right there facing me, looking directly at me. He was wearing a white t-shirt and had long, sort of messy hair and a slight beard. When I saw him, he didn't run away. Instead, he started to approach the window. I ran out of the room to the farthest away location in the house that I could get to. Then I called the police. When I spoke with them, I told them everything. I even remembered to include how the man was likely at my house other nights too. Meanwhile, I didn't hear any more noises from the window or anything as I waited for the police, and when they arrived, they searched the entire property, but the man was now gone. I talked with them for a while, giving them all the details that I could, but ultimately, they left with me not feeling that much better. My only hope was the fact that the police showed up would scare the man from coming back. The next night, everything was fine, but the night after that, I woke up in the night to noise again. My window was closed now, so I would no longer hear the bushes moving. This time, I woke up to the sound of a bang against my bedroom window. It was a loud noise, as if somebody was trying to break the glass. I turned my light on and sat up. In the past, that scared the man off, but this time, it didn't. I heard another loud bang on the window. I couldn't see the guy because my blinds were closed, but I knew he was there, and I called the police again and ran out of the room. I couldn't believe how this guy would not leave me alone. There was then another loud bang from the window, and then another one moments later. This time, I heard the glass starting to break. I was so nervous that I ran to the front door and grabbed my keys. The next bang broke more glass, and the man was sure to get inside the house now. When I started to hear movement near the window, I opened my front door quietly, went outside, closed the door, and then sprinted out for my car. When I got inside, I started it and drove away from there. I drove around the block in nearby neighborhoods until I got another call from the police saying that they were there. When I returned, to my surprise, they had caught the man. It was a huge relief to me. He had broken into my house and smashed my window, and apparently was searching through the house for me and was found in my basement. This story is the strangest thing to ever happen to me. It was last year, and I was about an hour away from my house where I lived and on my way home. I was hungry and it was nighttime. I hadn't had dinner yet and saw a Burger King, so I stopped off for some food. I parked in the parking lot and went inside. When I got inside, the place seemed sort of quiet, but I did see a few people eating inside and one person up by the counter. I walked over and somebody took my order. They told me it would be a little while, so I took a step back and waited. I decided while I was waiting to go use the bathroom, and I walked down the hall. I got inside the bathroom and was in there for maybe a minute total. I took my time washing my hands, but once I left the bathroom and walked back out, I noticed that the light in the hallway was now off. Then I got to the main part of the restaurant and saw that all of those lights were off as well. I walked over to the counter. Everything seemed to be off, and nobody was back there. I guess maybe they closed soon, but I had still placed my order, and nobody else that had been in there before was there. I walked all around the whole restaurant, and every light was off, and nobody else was inside at all. There was no sounds coming from the kitchen area, and I looked back around and couldn't see anybody. I then walked out of the restaurant. My car was the only car in the parking lot now, too. I had no idea what was going on, and I just drove away, feeling creeped out. I still have no way of explaining it, and every time I've told the story to other people, they don't believe me. Some people think the employees were playing a joke on me and turned all the lights off and hid or something like that. Maybe that's true, but I don't know how they would do it all so fast. Either way, it's very strange. I live in a pretty populated city. About a month ago, I was walking home from work one night. Many times, I find myself walking back a little bit later at night, like 10 or 11 p.m. That's about the usual time that I get done with work. I walk right through a park on my way home, and I enjoy it during the day, but when it's nighttime, it always seems a little spooky. One time, I was walking home from work, and I was going down the path in the park, and I got a call on my cell phone. I looked, but it said unknown caller, so I ignored it and kept walking. This is something that I probably would have just forgotten, but the crazy thing is that it happened again the very next night. I was walking home, and it was right around the same time as I was going through the park, and my phone rang again. It was also from an unknown caller. This time, I declined the call and kept walking. The very next night, I found myself walking home at night again, and once more, my phone rang as I was walking through the park. This time, I was curious as to why this kept happening, and I answered it. When I said hello, the first thing that I heard on the other end was the sound of somebody breathing. It was as if they were right up to the phone. They didn't say anything though. I asked who this was. At first, I just kept hearing the breathing on the other end. Then they spoke. It was a man's voice who said, "I can see you." He said it in the creepiest way possible. He continued, "I watch you walk through the park every night." I asked again who this was. Then he said, "Look to your left." I was standing on a path that was going right through the park, and to the left there was a bench. The bench was empty, but behind the bench there were a few really thick bushes. I looked in that direction, and at first saw nothing. Then I saw a man starting to step out of the bushes. I didn't stop to get a good look at him. I just started running. I remember when I began to run, hearing some laughter from the man. He didn't chase me. I ran the quickest way possible out of that park and back onto the sidewalk. Then I hung up the phone, which was still on the call with the guy. I walked as fast as I could the rest of the way back to my apartment and looked over my shoulder literally every 5 seconds. In the days that followed, I took a taxi to and from work. Eventually, I started walking to work again, but I still avoid that park, especially at night. When I had just graduated from high school, I worked at a McDonald's for the summer before college. My name is Jess, and this took place probably almost 10 years ago now. I was working one night, and it was probably like 10 or 11 o'clock. I got off a short time after that, and at that point, I'd been working there for maybe 2 months total. Things were really quiet, and had been for the past few hours. I was working in the drive-thru, and I'd been doing that a lot at the time. A car pulled in, which was the first one in at least 5 minutes. When they stopped at the intercom, I spoke and asked to take their order. There appeared to be a man driving, and instead of ordering, he just asked, "Is this Jess speaking?" It caught me off guard. Was this somebody that I knew? I didn't recognize him. How could he know my name? I paused before saying, "Why are you asking?" He responded by saying that he knew it was me and he recognized my voice. I asked the man if I knew him because I was 90% sure that I didn't. He responded by saying no, I didn't know him. I asked the man if he was going to order anything, and he paused, and then he said he would just see me later tonight, and then drove off. He sped through the rest of the drive-thru area after that. It was an extremely weird thing to happen, and I hoped that the man was just joking. I worked for maybe only 30 minutes or so after that, and then I was off for the night. I lived at my parents' house back then, which was about a little under a 10-minute drive from the McDonald's that I worked at. Afterwards, I drove home. My neighborhood was pretty typical, but when I pulled onto my street, I drove down to my house, which was the 5th one down from the end. I saw a car parked out right in front of my driveway, but to the side between my house and my neighbor's. I had never seen it before. My heart started to race. I realized that it was the same car that had been in the drive-thru. I guessed this guy was serious when he said he would see me later. But who was he, and how did he know where I lived? I pulled into my driveway, which is something that I instantly regretted. I saw the car start, and then begin going into reverse. It parked so that it was completely blocking me in my driveway. I got out of the car right then and there, and sprinted for the front door of my house. When I got there, it was locked. I started banging on it and trying to open it frantically. My keys were somewhere in my pockets, and I guess I was just so panicked that I didn't think to grab them. After probably 10 seconds, which felt like an hour, my mom opened up the door. I got inside, slammed the door shut, and then locked it. Then I explained to my parents what had happened. We looked outside, and the car was still there. My dad then took a step outside. I'm not sure if he was going to confront the man, or just get a better look, but as soon as he did, the car sped off. It didn't come back that night, and the next day, I told my manager at McDonald's about it. Unfortunately, there's not really much anybody could do. The problem was, the car the guy drove was really typical, just a black 4-door sedan, and looked maybe 5 to 10 years old or so. I'm not even sure what make it was. I personally don't think I ever encountered the guy again, and luckily, I didn't work at the McDonald's much longer after that. Like most people, I've been to McDonald's probably over 100 times. Last year, I lived in an apartment building that was within a walking distance of a McDonald's. It was right down the street and then across another one. It took maybe 10 minutes at most for me to get there, and I took advantage of this several times on late nights when I was really hungry. One night, a few months ago, it was really late, but I was starving. I think it was a Friday night, and I had been out late. I got back home, but wasn't really that tired. However, I was starving. I walked over to the McDonald's and then went inside and ordered on the touchscreen that they had. Nobody else was in there at this hour, and when I got my food, I took the bag and left to walk back to my house. This McDonald's had the back parking lot up against a wooded area. It was kind of on the edge of the shopping area, and then it led to a more residential area, which is where my apartment was. There was a long sidewalk that went along the side of it, and I would walk that and then cross the street. As I was walking down the sidewalk all by myself, I soon started to hear footsteps behind me. They were maybe 100 feet back, so pretty far. I'm not sure why, but I looked behind me. Maybe it was because of how quiet things were. There were really no cars on the road, and nobody else was out walking for sure. When I looked though, I saw a man dressed as Ronald McDonald, the full suit and everything. It wasn't Halloween time either, so this was super strange. Why was there some guy dressed as Ronald McDonald at 1 o'clock in the morning? He was walking behind me on the path, as if he had just emerged from the woods or something. Eventually, I crossed the street. I didn't expect Ronald McDonald to cross as well, but he did. He was still pretty far behind me, but the longer I walked and he remained behind me, the more nervous I felt. Eventually, I made it back to my apartment complex. The guy was still following me, and still about the same distance behind. The way he was walking was sort of creepy too. I'm not really sure how to explain it, but it wasn't just an average walk. It was sort of slow and robotic almost. I was in a hurry now to get inside, and I got to my apartment building and went in. I got up to my unit, which was on the 4th floor, and went inside. I felt so much better to be off the streets with that weirdo. I wasn't really sure where he ended up going, because I hadn't cared to look behind me. I went into my bedroom in my apartment and looked outside. When I did, I saw the Ronald McDonald guy standing in the parking lot, staring right up at my window at me. He was expressionless and didn't move. I was super creeped out by this now. I closed the blinds to my window, and then closed the blinds to every other window that I had. I did my best to ignore the whole situation after that, and the next day, he was gone. I'm not sure who the guy was or why he followed me, and looking back, that was a super creepy thing for the guy to do, whoever he was. The story takes place a long time ago. It wasn't before cell phones, but it was before cell phones were an everyday thing. I mostly just used my home phone, and there was speed dial, but more times than not, you would have to dial the whole number every time you wanted to call somebody. Well, the story was on a Friday night, and I was home with my sister. We were both in high school at the time, and our parents were gone for the night with friends. We always liked to order pizza when our parents were gone, and there was this one spot in particular that was our favorite. My sister asked me to call, and I dialed the number. Apparently, when I was dialing though, I messed something up, but I didn't realize it. A male's voice answered, saying, "Hello?" He sounded kind of confused, like he was wondering why I called. It seemed odd, but I said that I was calling to order a pizza. The guy responded saying, "Okay." I went ahead with my order of a large pepperoni pizza. The guy just said, "Okay, what's your address?" I gave him my address, and he then said okay. It was kind of awkward, but we then said bye and hung up. My sister and I went into the living room and started watching TV, waiting for the pizza to get there. We had the money and tip on the counter waiting as well. About 20 minutes went by. We were getting really hungry and hoping that the pizza would be there soon. I happened to go over and look out the window, just out of curiosity. Then I saw a car coming down the street, very slowly. When I saw it come to a stop in front of our house, I told my sister that the pizza was here. She got excited and ran to get the money. I expected the car to pull into our driveway, but it drove a little bit past our house. I also noticed that there was no pizza delivery thing on top of the car. "Wait," I told my sister. The car then parked on the side of the road a little ways in front of our house. I watched the driver's door open and a man walk out. He began walking in the direction of our house, but he wasn't holding a pizza. I asked my sister to come and look, and she joined me at the window. We both watched the man walk into our front yard towards our front door. When he got closer, we both noticed that he was wearing a ski mask. When we noticed that detail, we ducked down at almost the exact same time. I was wondering what was going on. About 5 seconds later, there was a knock at the front door. My sister and I were whispering to each other, wondering who this guy was. After a few seconds of us not answering the door, he knocked again. Then, we heard a voice say, "Pizza delivery." We knew this was clearly not a pizza delivery. We were not going to answer. About 30 seconds went by with nothing. Then, he knocked again and said, even louder than before, "I'm the pizza guy with your pizza." He then knocked once more and said, "Open up." We were not going to, and we tried to be as quiet as we could. My sister and I were literally laying on the carpeted floor of our living room, trying not to make a sound. After maybe 2 or 3 minutes, he knocked again. Then, finally, we heard him walking away. I quietly went back to the couch and peeked out the window very carefully. I saw the man get back into his car and drive away. After my sister and I discussed what on earth just happened for a while, we decided to call the pizza place again. This time, we got the number correct, and we realized what had happened. We ordered the pizza for real and got it a short time later. I'm not sure what number exactly I called the first time, but whoever I called decided to pretend to be a pizza delivery man with a ski mask on. To this day, I still wonder what his intentions were. What would have happened if my sister or I opened the front door? I'm really glad that we didn't. 6 years ago, I worked at a Burger King. At the time back then, it was the only job that I could find in my area close to where I lived. I should mention I'm a female and I was recently out of high school. Working there was okay for the most part. Some of my coworkers were pretty cool, but others were weird. One of those weird ones was my manager, Jason. I thought Jason was strange from the first time that I got a job there and was hired. I mostly tried to avoid him because he would always have weird conversations with people and give weird looks. He also added me on Facebook early on, and he would post some really strange things. The guy just overall seemed odd. He never really did anything that crazy at work, but a lot of little things. I only worked at the Burger King for a total of 4 months. When I was able to find a different job, I quit and started working somewhere else. I think about 2 months after I left Burger King, I got home from my new job one night to see a car parked in front of my house. I didn't recognize it, so it was a little bit strange, but when I looked closer, I saw that the car was off and nobody appeared to be inside. I went inside after that. I lived with my parents, and by this time it was late, probably like 11 p.m., and they had already gone to bed. I changed, took a shower, and then got into my bedroom. After I got in bed, I looked out my window, which was next to it, and I saw the car on the street still parked where it had been earlier. But this time, it looked like somebody was inside the driver's seat and moving around. I stood up and got closer to the window to get a better look. When I did, I finally saw who it was. The driver appeared to look right at me as I was looking out at them, and it was my old boss, Jason, from Burger King. We made eye contact for about a second, and afterwards, he looked over and I saw him suddenly start the car and then drive off. I couldn't believe my eyes. I hadn't been expecting to see him at all, and this was pretty creepy. The next day, I drove back to the Burger King where I had worked. I walked inside and found the person working behind the counter. Thankfully, it was morning time and not very busy yet, and I wanted an explanation for what had happened. I didn't recognize the person working and had never seen them when I was there. I asked him if Jason was there. The guy behind the counter shook his head and said he wasn't sure who that was. I then saw someone who I had been a coworker with named Chris. He walked over and said hi to me. I asked him if Jason was working. He told me no, Jason had been fired a month earlier. When I asked more, he didn't know exactly why he had been fired. All he knew was he didn't work there anymore. I told him about seeing Jason outside my house the night before. He told me that he hadn't seen Jason since before he was fired, but he said after I had quit, Jason talked about me a lot, and he found it creepy. I was really angry hearing this. I left and went back home, but I didn't really think anything could be done about it. It didn't seem like he had done anything illegal, because he never actually went into my yard. I was nervous that night, and I had a hard time getting to sleep, but thankfully, I didn't see Jason or his car. I figured I scared him off when I saw him the previous night. The next few nights, I didn't see him either. But about a week later, when I was sleeping in the middle of the night, I woke up to hear noises coming from my window. I was really dazed at first from being asleep, but quickly woke up when I saw the figure of a man taking up my whole bedroom window. I turned the lights on and screamed, and he quickly disappeared. My parents woke up from across the hall and ran in. We called the police after that. When they arrived, I told them everything. Luckily, Jason ended up being caught. I'm currently a senior in college, and this story took place during last year. I'm an engineering major, and have taken some pretty difficult classes in recent years. I always study better in the library or classroom than I do in my room, so I would often go find a place to study and get my work done. I remember that this past spring, finals week was approaching, and I had several big projects due, so one Friday night, I decided to go study in a classroom. I know it's not something most people like to do on a Friday night, but I had some plans for the weekend and wanted to get it done beforehand. I went to the engineering hall at about 9 p.m., and when I arrived, it was locked. When this happened, I could call a security guard, and they would unlock the doors for students if you showed them your ID. Then you could use the building to study. I did this, and when the door was unlocked for me, I entered and saw that nobody else was in there. It was strange being in there with all the lights out at night, and and I went down one of the first hallways where there were some classrooms, and I entered the first one, which I happened to have a class in, and I turned on the light. Then I found a desk, sat down, and began working. I got really focused and was getting a lot done. Maybe about an hour passed when I heard footsteps come out of nowhere. I looked up to see the classroom door open and a guy walk in. The man was wearing a red sweatshirt, jeans, and a baseball cap. He stood in the doorway and asked me if I minded if he studied in there as well. I was sort of annoyed by this, because there were plenty of other classrooms he could go to, and nobody else was here. I didn't even know who this guy was. I told him sure though, because I didn't want to seem like a jerk. He had a backpack, and set it down at the first desk in the front of the room. Then he sat down at the desk. I went back to work at my desk, which was more towards the back of the room. I sat at that one, because that was where my seat was in class, and I was just more comfortable there. After several minutes, I glanced up at the guy, and I noticed something strange. His backpack was still on the ground next to his desk, and he hadn't taken anything out of it. He was just sitting there in his desk, staring straight forward, it seemed. He wasn't even on his phone. I went back to work, and over time, looked over to him a few more times, and nothing changed. The guy was just making me uncomfortable, and I was losing my focus. Plus, it was getting late, almost 11 p.m., so I decided I would pack it up and leave. I closed my laptop and put it in my backpack along with my book. I then got up and walked to the door. As I passed by the other guy in the room, I saw that he was still just sitting there, and I could feel his eyes watching me as I left. I walked down the hall and out to the main entrance of the building. That's when I heard footsteps coming down the hallway. I just knew it was the guy, and he was leaving now. Nobody else had been in there. I was getting suspicious of him, and I picked up my pace in walking. I left the building and went out to my car in the parking lot. When I got outside, I noticed there was just one other car in the parking lot, and sure enough, I saw the guy come out the doors and was headed for the car. I drove off to go back to my apartment. It was only about a 5-minute drive, and I lived just a few blocks outside of campus. I drove there with the guy tailing me in his car. I parked in my parking space and got out to go inside. I noticed that the car the guy was in parked a few spaces away from mine, but the guy stayed inside the car. This made me feel a little better for some reason, although I still didn't know what he was doing. But I went inside my apartment and then went up to my window to watch. I knew the guy didn't live here because there were only 8 units, and I had seen everyone else who lived there over the course of the year. Plus, I had never seen his car before. The guy stayed sitting in his car with the lights on for quite some time. So long that even when I was in bed about to fall asleep, I looked out and saw that he was still there. By then, it had to be about 2 a.m. Eventually, I fell asleep. The next morning, I woke up, and when I looked out the window, the guy was not there anymore, thankfully. I went outside, and when I did, I noticed on the outside of my front door, near where the lock was, as well as on the side of the door near where it opened, there were noticeable scratches and small dents that hadn't been there before. I think that guy had tried to break into my apartment during the night while I was asleep. I always wondered who he was and why he did this. This happened last year. It was a really nice spring day, and I went for a walk in the park after work, which was a routine I did almost daily. During my job, I would sit at a desk all day, so it felt great to get up and move around afterwards. I have an apartment on the edge of the city, and the park is just a couple of blocks away. On this one particular day, with it being so nice out, I walked a little bit farther than usual and walked in a couple of city streets. Finally, I circled back around through the park and back to my place. There were quite a few other people out walking and such. I was probably out for about an hour or so total. When I had made it maybe 5 blocks within my apartment, somebody tapped me on the shoulder from behind. I looked back, and there was a man standing there who was tall and thin and appeared to be around my age. He said to me that he wasn't sure if I was aware or not, but somebody had been following me. Then he mentioned to me that the guy had just walked away, but had seemingly been following me for almost 20 minutes. I was completely unaware of this. I asked the man who the person was who had been following me, and the guy said that he was short with dark brown hair and wearing a white shirt. I told the guy that I didn't know about it, and I asked him where the guy had gone who had been following me. I was told he went in the opposite direction. Then I said thanks and continued walking home. I really hadn't been paying very good attention, I guessed. As I was walking the rest of the way home, I wondered who it had been who was following me and why they would do that. I also paid much closer attention and looked around, but I did not see the man who had been described to me. I got back to my apartment, and several more times throughout the night, I wondered who it was who had been following me. I decided that I would take a break from walking after that. But the very next night, something else happened. My apartment was on the ground level, and I had a little patio outside. There wasn't a whole lot of space, but it was nice for me to have. It was probably 10 p.m., and I was moving into my living room, which opens out to the patio. As I did, I saw a figure of what appeared to be a man moving away from the window. It looked as though the guy had been right next to the window. However, with it being dark out and me just seeing him walking away, I couldn't tell much. I hadn't gotten a look at his face or anything. It made me remember the man who had allegedly followed me home, and I became worried that somebody was stalking me. I went over to the window and looked out, but by the time I got there, the man was gone. I just hoped at that point that he wouldn't come back, and for that night, he didn't. 2 nights later, though, I was home alone again, and this time, already in my living room. It was a little bit later, about 11 p.m., and I was on the couch using my laptop. That's when I looked up, and out of the corner of my eye, saw what looked like a person outside for a second. Now, I was already in the room and much closer to the window. This really surprised me, and I sat up and turned on the back patio light. When the light turned on, the man who was walking towards the window became exposed. Then I got a clear look at him. He was tall and thin, and I recognized him. It was the same guy who had told me that I had been followed. When the guy saw me, he quickly turned around and ran away. I stayed up really late that night, unable to sleep. I did not want the man to come back. Thankfully, he didn't. My name is Jamie. A few years ago, several strange things started happening. It all began around Facebook. I logged into my account one day to find a new message from somebody. I used Facebook pretty regularly at the time, and I had for years. Over all the time that I had a Facebook, I received hundreds of friend requests. I certainly didn't know many of the people on my friends list. I would probably get about 5 to 10 friend requests per week on average, and most of the time I would just accept them. The message that I had received looked like spam. It was like multiple links, and those links were really long. There was no text to go along with the links, and I didn't open them. It was sent from some guy with no profile picture. I figured that he was some spam account, and I accidentally accepted a friend request from him or something in the past. I deleted the conversation and unfriended the guy, but only the next day, I got a very similar message. It was from another user. This time, the user did have a profile picture, but it was really generic. I think it was just a logo of a sports team. This person had also sent some random links. By now, I was suspecting that there was some type of Facebook hack going around, and spam messages were being sent. I just deleted them and went on, but they didn't stop. The next day, I had spam messages from multiple accounts. I was wondering what was going on. Then, the day after that is when things got even weirder and took a creepy twist. I saw that I had a friend request, and when I looked at it, the username was Jamie Smith Sucks. Jamie Smith is actually my real name, and I also got a friend request with somebody with the username Jamie Smith is an idiot. I clicked on these profiles, and they looked like they had just been created. Somebody was seemingly trying to mess with me. I didn't know who, and I didn't know why. Obviously, I declined those goofy friend requests, and I decided that I would not go on Facebook for a few days. I deleted the app from my phone, and I didn't go on it through my laptop either, but I couldn't escape the strange things. The next day or two went by fine, but then, one night at about midnight, there was a knock on my front door. I lived by myself in an apartment, and I walked over to the door wondering who would be there so late. No one was there when I looked. The next day, this happened again. A knocking at my door, but nobody was there when I looked outside. The day after that, I left my place to find that there was a picture on the floor right in front of my door. The picture was my Facebook profile pic, and it appeared as though somebody had just printed it off on a piece of paper. This was really starting to concern me, but I had no idea what could be done about it. The last straw was the next day. It was 11 o'clock at night, and I was home in my apartment. There was once again another knocking at my front door. Immediately following the knock, I heard that the knob to the door was turned. Luckily, the door was in fact locked. I walked over and looked out. No one was there again. I opened up the door, and on the ground was at least 100 pieces of paper with my profile picture printed on them. They were all stacked in a pile. I took them all and went to the police the next day. I told them everything and made a report. Beyond that, there wasn't much that I could do. But surprisingly, after I went to the police, everything just stopped. There was no more knocks at my door, no more things left outside, and no more weird Facebook messages or friend requests. I still don't know who did that to me though. This happened many years ago in 2013. I used Facebook quite a bit back then, but I don't really use it at all anymore. On a daily basis, I would use the Facebook app on my phone and had the Messenger app as well. I talked to several of my friends that way, and when this happened, I was about 19 years old. I had probably upwards of 500 friends on there, which is a lot of people, but I've seen accounts with thousands. Anyways, I got a friend request from a girl named Veronica. I saw that we had about 5 mutual friends, and based on her picture, she looked nice. I looked at her profile page, but there wasn't much there. Just her age, which was also 19, and she had 2 pictures, and I saw that she had about 200 friends. After skimming over her page, I didn't actually know who she was, but I accepted the friend request. Our mutual friends were some people who I had gone to high school with, but didn't really know all that well as one other person who I didn't go to high school with, but lived in the general area. Not too long after I accepted her request, she sent me a message. I went to the Messenger app and I started talking with her. She was really cool and we hit it off. We talked for probably about a week before we wanted to meet up. I knew that she lived in the area, but I didn't know exactly where. Veronica suggested that we meet at a local mall, and there was a really popular shopping center about 10 minutes from my house. We decided to meet that Saturday at 11 a.m. In the meantime, we kept talking quite a bit just like usual. When it was Saturday, I drove to the mall and went inside. It was pretty busy with it being a weekend. I had let Veronica know when I was leaving, and I think she left at around the same time as me. When I got inside, I messaged her that I was there, but that's when she stopped replying to me initially. At first, she told me that she was inside the mall and would look for me, but after that, I told her where I was and she didn't go there. I was standing in the food court for like 10 minutes and didn't see any sign of her. I reached out to her again, but did not get a response. I did see that she had seen my message though. When she didn't show up for another 5 minutes, I decided to walk around the mall looking for her. I figured that maybe the signal on her phone was bad or something, or maybe she had put her phone in her pocket with our conversation still open. I was just telling myself things like that, but I started to get a bad feeling. The mall was pretty big. It wasn't like the Mall of America or anything, but it was a decent size, and it did have 2 levels. There were also a lot of people there, so it would be tough, but not impossible to find someone. At one point though, when I was looking around, I did see this one guy who kind of looked like he was staring at me from afar. When I walked all around the mall, I saw the guy again, but he was walking a ways back behind me. I walked around for maybe 20 minutes. I really wanted to meet Veronica, but the more I walked around, the more I felt like she wasn't actually there. Then, finally, I felt my phone vibrate. I looked, and Veronica had sent me a message. She said, "Come to the entrance by the food court." That was the first area that I had been, and I had told her when I was there. I walked back over to it, which took me about 2 or 3 minutes. When I got back there, I looked around. It was still crowded, but I didn't see Veronica. I was a good ways away from the entrance doors, and I started to walk over to them. But that's when I noticed that the same guy that I had seen multiple times before was right there. He was standing right by the entrance and kind of looking around. Then, when he made eye contact with me for a brief moment, he walked behind one of the doors. I started to get suspicious, and I decided that I was just going to leave, but I was going to leave in a different door than that one. I began walking in the opposite direction. When I did, I noticed the guy then start to walk through the food court towards me. I picked up the pace and turned a corner to another hallway. I walked quickly and did make it to the exit. I didn't see the man behind me when I made it there. After that, I walked around the mall on the outside until I made it to the parking lot that I had parked in. Then I drove home. By the time I was home, I looked and saw that I had a message from Veronica. The message said, "Why didn't you come to the food court entrance like I asked? Why did you just leave?" By this time, I knew that Veronica likely didn't exist, and the one guy that I saw was running the account. I asked her to send me a picture of herself right now. Then she blocked me. That pretty much confirmed my suspicions. I was disappointed, obviously, but I also felt good that I wasn't a victim to anything further than being catfished. From that point forward, I was much more careful with who I talked to online. I live live by myself in a one-story house that I own. Last year, it was during the summertime, and I was sleeping with the window open a crack to let more cool air in. My bedroom is at the front side of the house, and there's a giant row of large bushes that are along the side of the house, and they stop just at the side of my window. I was woken up from my sleep when I heard the noise of rustling in the bushes. I'm a pretty light sleeper, but with the window open, the noise was rather loud. When I woke up, I looked to the window, but I kept my blinds down just above the roughly 3-inch crack in the window, so I really couldn't see outside at all. I flicked on the light, which was right at my bedside, and my room then lit up. I got out of bed and went to the window to see, but then I heard more rustling in the bushes. I didn't see anything as I walked over there, and I was quite confident that the noises were caused by an animal, likely a deer. There was a pretty big woods and a park bordering my next-door neighbor's backyard, so we would often get all kinds of wild animals wandering in our yards at night. When I got to the window, I lifted up the blinds and looked outside, but still didn't see anything. Whatever had been there was now gone. After that, I just went back to bed. Probably a couple of nights later, almost the exact same thing happened. I was once again sleeping and woke up in the night to the sound of the bushes moving. I had my window open a few inches again, and my blinds mostly down. Everything was just as it had been all week. I sat up and turned my lights on again. I looked to the window and just barely saw movement of something going away. I couldn't tell what it was at all because of how dark it was, but I had a feeling that maybe it wasn't an animal, but a person. I went over to the window and looked out of it again, but they were gone. This time, I closed the window and locked it and put the blinds down all the way. I was able to go back to bed after that without a problem. I was telling myself it was just an animal, but I just had a creepy feeling that it wasn't. The very next night, I was up late. It was a Friday night and I was watching TV in my bed. I hadn't put my blinds down yet because I wasn't ready to go to sleep. It was probably around 1 o'clock in the morning, and I saw something out of the corner of my eye. I turned and looked to the window. That's when I saw a man standing right there facing me, looking directly at me. He was wearing a white t-shirt and had long, sort of messy hair and a slight beard. When I saw him, he didn't run away. Instead, he started to approach the window. I ran out of the room to the farthest away location in the house that I could get to. Then I called the police. When I spoke with them, I told them everything. I even remembered to include how the man was likely at my house other nights too. Meanwhile, I didn't hear any more noises from the window or anything as I waited for the police, and when they arrived, they searched the entire property, but the man was now gone. I talked with them for a while, giving them all the details that I could, but ultimately, they left with me not feeling that much better. My only hope was the fact that the police showed up would scare the man from coming back. The next night, everything was fine, but the night after that, I woke up in the night to noise again. My window was closed now, so I would no longer hear the bushes moving. This time, I woke up to the sound of a bang against my bedroom window. It was a loud noise, as if somebody was trying to break the glass. I turned my light on and sat up. In the past, that scared the man off, but this time, it didn't. I heard another loud bang on the window. I couldn't see the guy because my blinds were closed, but I knew he was there, and I called the police again and ran out of the room. I couldn't believe how this guy would not leave me alone. There was then another loud bang from the window, and then another one moments later. This time, I heard the glass starting to break. I was so nervous that I ran to the front door and grabbed my keys. The next bang broke more glass, and the man was sure to get inside the house now. When I started to hear movement near the window, I opened my front door quietly, went outside, closed the door, and then sprinted out for my car. When I got inside, I started it and drove away from there. I drove around the block in nearby neighborhoods until I got another call from the police saying that they were there. When I returned, to my surprise, they had caught the man. It was a huge relief to me. He had broken into my house and smashed my window, and apparently was searching through the house for me and was found in my basement. My name is Bree. When I went to high school, during my senior year, early on in the first semester, I remember noticing this one new kid in our school. I would call him Dave for this story. I had never seen him in our school before, and I had a history class with him. For the most part, that's all I knew of him. Beyond that, I didn't really notice him much at all. The next semester, I didn't have any classes with Dave. It was pretty early on in that second semester that one of my friends told me something shortly after I had gotten to school one day. She told me that Dave had been posting some really weird and borderline creepy Snapchat stories of me. Nobody in my friend group was friends with Dave on Snapchat, but apparently my friend had heard from a mutual friend about it.
Somebody who was friends with Dave on Snapchat had seen his stories and found them really odd. When I asked for examples, I was told that he had occasionally taken photos of me in class or in the hallway without my knowledge. Other times, he would post random pictures and mention me for whatever reason. To me, this did seem pretty strange, and I felt like I should tell Dave to stop. But I knew this might be really awkward to do, or he might deny it altogether. I thought about it for a little while, but I never really saw Dave anymore anyways. I didn't have any classes with him anymore. Plus, I never saw him in the hallways in between classes either. Our school was pretty big, with about 2,000 students total. Over time, I just kind of ignored it. I figured that maybe he was a bit of a creep, or maybe he had a crush on me, but if he didn't see me anymore, he would get over it. Roughly 2 weeks after finding out about this, I was told once again by a friend that Dave had posted a weird story about me. My friend had actually befriended Dave on Snapchat to see his stories. He posted a picture of my car in the student parking lot, saying the caption, "My favorite girl's car." Obviously, I found this really weird, and I knew that I needed to ask Dave to stop. Unfortunately, I could never seem to find Dave in the hallways, and I didn't want to go out looking for him. I decided that I would just add Dave on Snapchat, just for the purpose of asking him to stop posting weird things about me. So that day, when I got home from school, I asked my friend for Dave's username, and she gave it to me. Once I added Dave, he added me back, and he immediately snapped me saying hi. I snapped him back, telling him that I was made aware of the strange things that he was posting about me, and that I needed him to stop doing so. He opened my snap, but didn't reply. Then, I deleted him. A couple of hours later, when I was in my bedroom, I suddenly heard a loud noise against my window. I had been at my desk finishing homework, which was about 5 feet from the window. I looked over to it, and there was another loud bang. This time, the window broke, and glass shattered everywhere. I jumped back and saw Dave standing right outside the window. He then started cursing at me. I was terrified. I already knew he did some creepy things, but this was really crossing the line. Then he came closer and started to crawl through the broken window. I jumped up and ran out of the room. My parents were home, but on the other side of the house in the living room. I ran over to them and was frantically screaming that somebody had broken in. Dave did not leave my bedroom, and after we called the police, he must have left, because when they got there, he was gone. Thankfully, I knew exactly who he was, and he was found that same night. It was a bad idea for me to add him on Snapchat, because my location was on, and I guess Dave could see exactly where I lived then. Since then, I've turned my location off, and I'm much more careful of who I add on Snapchat. Nothing else crazy like this has happened to me though. This story happened back when I was in college. Like many college guys, I used Snapchat quite a bit. I had probably over 1,000 Snapchat friends and would communicate with most of my friends through the app. I got to know a lot of my classmates better through snapping them or having snap streaks. Anyways, to get to the story, it all started one night when I was studying in my bedroom. I lived in a house with 2 roommates who were some good friends that I had made my freshman year. I had my own bedroom upstairs in the house, and so did each of my roommates. When I study, I tend to get distracted by my phone quite a bit, and when I looked at it on my desk, I saw somebody had added me on Snapchat. It was a girl named Kaylee. Her username didn't have a last name in it, just a bunch of numbers, so I wasn't quite sure who she was, but I figured that she went to my school, which is pretty large. I added her back, and I snapped her a picture of my face saying hi. She snapped me back, and she appeared to be around my age. We snapped back and forth for the rest of the night, and she told me that she also went to my university. The next night, I found myself home alone and bored. Both of my roommates went to their intramural sports games, and I had stayed home with an assignment, but I finished much earlier than I thought I would. I was still snapping Kaylee, and I told her about my situation. That's when she asked if I wanted her to come over. I really hadn't expected that, and I would have expected her to want to meet in a public place, or at least snap a few days before meeting, but I was cool with it. Kaylee asked me for my address, and I gave it to her. Both me and her were both on the Snap map, and it appeared that she lived on the other side of campus. Kaylee snapped me that she was leaving and would be at my place shortly. I went down and attempted to clean up the house a little bit. About 15 minutes later, there was a knock at the front door. I walked downstairs, expecting to see Kaylee, but instead saw some guy. There was a guy with a jacket and winter hat standing at the front door. I was really confused. I opened up the door crack and asked what the guy wanted. He told me that he was Kaylee's friend and had given her a ride to my house. He told me that Kaylee was in the car down the street, but he wanted to make sure it was safe and I wasn't some crazy person. He told me that he was just trying to look out for her and asked if he could come inside and look around. I was really weirded out by this. It caught me by surprise, and I told the guy to give me a second, and then I closed the door. I checked the snap map, and it showed Kaylee as being literally right outside of my front door, right where the guy was standing. I knew this wasn't right. I snapped Kaylee, asking who the guy was. She began typing quickly, and as she was typing, I looked outside and saw the guy typing on his phone. Eventually, she sent me a chat, and it said basically the same thing that the guy had said. The guy then knocked on the door again. I yelled from the other side for the guy to just leave, and I wasn't falling for his tricks. I then watched him walk away, and thankfully, he left. About 20 minutes later, I got a snap from Kaylee. I opened it to see a picture of the guy flipping me off. I opened it but didn't respond. A short time later, I got another snap. This one was of the same guy saying, "You still fell for a fake girl, you effing idiot." I then blocked the account. He was right in the fact that I had fallen for a fake girl, but I had seen pictures of her and wondered how he had done it. After some research though, I learned that the guy probably got some type of app that allows you to send pictures of snaps of whatever you want without it appearing as an uploaded photo. It's complicated, but not too hard to figure out. All the guy needed was multiple selfies of the same girl. I had noticed that her selfie style was a little different, but I looked past it. This whole thing was kind of embarrassing for me, but I'm just happy to say that I'm okay.